Hey guys, I am Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another Zombies video where today we are taking a look at the evolution of Call of Duty Zombies. For this episode, we are only taking a look at Treyarch's games. We also have zombies from other Call of Duty developers such as Infinity Ward and Sledgehammer, with World War II zombies, Infinite Warfare zombies, and Exo zombies. Personally, I'm not too familiar with all of those modes, and since I believe Treyarch is what started it off, it is the main and most popular zombies mode, we are going to take a look at its evolution from the very beginning all the way back in 2008, World at War, to our most recent, which was Black Ops 4. As always, if you do go on to enjoy today's video, a like rating would be appreciated if you want to. If not, it's totally fine. Thank you guys for watching anyway. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos, but let's get into it. Here we go and enjoy. So all the way back on November the 11th of 2008, the release date for Call of Duty World at War, little did we know that hidden within this game, there was a secret mode. Upon completing the campaign, a Nazi zombies mode would be unlocked, with one map, which would be Nakta and Toten. In this new game mode, players were tasked with surviving against endless rounds of the undead, boarding up windows, opening and clearing doors and debris, and using weapons, utilities and power-ups to their advantage, which all involve points as the currency. Since Nakta and Toten, which translated to Night of the Undead, was the first zombies map, it was the bare bones of zombies. The original version never contained any perk machines. These were added into later reincarnations, but we began with a shortcut scene where we see our character that we are playing as being swarmed by zombies after his plane crashed. Just like all of the other World at War maps, many of the features were taken from both the campaign and the multiplayer mode. Zombies in World at War was very minuscule, it didn't really have its own team. The people that originally created this game mode were a part of either the campaign or multiplayer team. Zombies didn't have its own, and that was how it was for quite a long time, and so because of that, it didn't have its own budget, and like I said, a lot of features had to be taken from other modes. Hence why all of these zombies maps from World at War, Nakta and Toten, Verrucht, Shinonuma and Aris, are from the campaign and multiplayer. And that also goes for the weapons. The only new one that was created for zombies was the ray gun. The characters that we played as in this map were just random marines taken from the campaign, and also, as you would have guessed, there was no storyline. I doubt Treyarch ever truly intended it to get past the first map. They definitely didn't think it would have been as big as it is today, but I don't think they would have been making DLC 1, 2 and 3, which included zombies maps. But to their surprise, Nakta and Toten got an awful lot of love. If you look on YouTube, there are videos everywhere of people reacting the first time they played this. People wanted more, and that's exactly what they got. DLC 1, we had Verrucht. This was set in an abandoned asylum, again playing as some random marines. However, one of these characters would become very well known to us later on, and that was Dempsey, but during this time Treyarch didn't know that. There still wasn't really a story implemented here, however there was a few interesting Easter eggs. A couple more than Nakta and Toten. Verrucht was also the first map to introduce traps into zombies. This would later go on to be a staple. It also introduced to us the perk machines, obviously something that would return in zombies, at least until Black Ops 4, and a power switch. World at War, I would say, was the game that we got the most evolution on. We move on to our next map, which was DLC 2 Shinonuma, where even more features were added, and this was the first time we played as Ultimus. The OG characters, Nikolai, Takeo, Dempsey and Richtofen, we played as them for the very first time in Shinonuma. Here we had a few more Easter eggs than the previous maps. It was the first time we really saw Element 115, a massive meteor that you could find in the swamp. It also gave us a new wonder weapon, which was the Wunderwaffe DG2, and if I'm not wrong in saying this is off the top of my head, but this was the first map that we saw special enemy types. Instead of just the usual zombies, we now saw a new enemy which was the Hellhounds. And then finally for World at War, DLC 3, we had Derice. My personal favourite map out of the bunch. I would also say possibly the most revolutionary zombies map we have ever had. Yet another new feature that was introduced here was the Pack-a-Punch machine. It's quite difficult to believe that it was actually given to us for the first time 3 or 4 maps in. We also saw the Monkey Bomb and the Teleporters for the first time, yet again playing as Dempsey, Nikolai, Takeo and Richtofen. But I would say the most important thing was this is where the story began. This was the first map that we had radios talking about Group 935, Maxis, Richtofen, Samantha, the creation of the zombies. Derice introduced loads of new features that would go on to stay in zombies for many years. And then, as some years pass, as Treyarch begin to work on their next game that releases on November the 9th, 2010, this was Call of Duty Black Ops. I recently did a video about this the other day. If you do want to check it out, I will link it down in the description. But Black Ops was the first game that we had 2 zombies maps on disc. We started off with Kino der Toten and 5. For this game, Treyarch also had their own zombies division with their own budget, but still nowhere near the scale of the campaign or multiplayer team. The graphical difference between World at War Black Ops, I would say, was quite big. It was definitely noticeable. The maps looked cleaner, more crisp. Obviously, if you're comparing that time to now, it hasn't aged too well, but I remember when it came out and it was definitely a good looking game. Black Ops Zombies was also different because it was set during the Cold War era, which meant the weapons were different to the World War II weapons that we had in World at War. Also similar to World at War, 5 actually wasn't a map that you would get straight away. In order to access this initially, you would have had to complete the campaign, or you could go into the computer console in the main menu and type Treyarch Unlock. I think they did just give it to everyone eventually anyway, but that was how you had to unlock it. In terms of evolution though, I would say 5 didn't really add too many new things from the previous game. We did have a new enemy type, which was the Pentagon Thief, a returning wonder weapon being the Winter's Howl. We did have an intro cutscene, which during this time was very rare. The only map before this that had a cutscene was the very first one, Nakta and Toten, and actually all of the ones after this for Black Ops 1, there weren't cutscenes for. And also, this was the first time we saw buildables, although I don't know if you can really count it, since it was just an electrical trap. The other map, Kino der Toten, didn't really change much, really just a new wonder weapon being the Thunder Gun, and then for DLC 1 we had Ascension. This was the first map that we ever had a main Easter egg for, which again is hard to believe this far into zombies, where we had a storyline that began in Derice. We had smaller Easter eggs before, but we never had a main quest that you could complete, get an ending and an achievement for, and Ascension is where that was introduced. And since then, we've had a main quest in every zombies map. Apart from that though, nothing too new, just new weapons such as the sickle, some new perks like PhD Flopper, new and interesting ways of activating the Pack-a-Punch, but nothing revolutionary. And then we go on to the next DLC map, which was Call of the Dead. Again, nothing really major besides new traps and a new perk being introduced, which was Deadshot, and just with every zombies maps a new wonder weapon as well. Actually, this one had 2, being the Scavenger and the VR11. Also the Wonder Waffle if you did manage to kill George. I will say this was the first zombies map that introduced a celebrity cast. Instead of playing as the OG Ultimus characters Richtofen, Takeo, Nikolai and Dempsey, we now played as celebrities. And this was something we do every now and again. It was rare, but when Treyarch did it, it was fun. And then the final 2 maps were Shangri-La, where we didn't have too much change. Again, I'm going to keep repeating this, there was just new perks. One of the new ones was Mule Kick on Moon. New wonder weapons such as the 31-79 JGB 215, along with the Wave Gun and the Dual Guns. Moon especially at the time was considered to be a massive map set in space, low gravity. It was totally different to anything we'd had before. But as we move on, some years go by, and on November the 13th, 2012, Treyarch releases their next installment into zombies, Black Ops 2. From this point onwards, I'm going to stop talking about individual maps because most of the features at this point were implemented into zombies, and so going forward individually for maps, we didn't really get many new game-changing features from one map to another that would go on to stay. Besides from perks and weapons, the maps on themselves didn't really evolve feature-wise from the previous ones. Black Ops 2 contained plenty of maps from Transit, that was the base map on disc. However, we know we could also play different sections of it, which were Town, Farm, Bus Depot and Diner. Transit was definitely another revolutionary stage in zombies. It was very different to any other map we'd had previously. It was a big risk that Treyarch were paying. Did it pay off? I wouldn't say so. When this map released, a lot of people were hating on it. It was disappointing to say the least. I don't think it turned out how they wanted it to, especially releasing on the last generation consoles with the bus system and how big the map was using fog. I think if they were to remake Transit now, it would be pretty decent, but I feel like it was a bit too ahead of its time. Black Ops 2 was important because this was the first time we switched main characters for more than one map. We went from Ultimus to Victus. A couple of new things that BO2 added was the banking system, being able to store your points for other games, and the fridge where you could keep your weapons. It's actually a shame that after BO2 these features didn't return because I actually like them. BO2 also had a big role to play in buildables. Even though I said earlier they were first introduced in 5, really it was Transit. There were many buildables such as traps and wonder weapons. We were also given a few new perks. One of them was Double Tap 2.0. This was a more improved version of the one we'd seen before. In Transit we also had Tombstone Soda. Other maps we had Nuketown Zombies, Die Rise, Mob of the Dead, Buried and Origins. I think all of the maps with Victus were pretty similar in terms of how they played. Mob of the Dead was unique because we once again returned with a celebrity cast set in Alcatraz prison, but Origins was definitely the biggest map out of the bunch, introducing giant robots, the premise characters, a new dimension. For me at the time it felt like this map was kind of similar to Transit in terms of being ahead of its time. The robots definitely made it feel futuristic even though it took place in World War I. Black Ops 2 was also the game where we started to see side weapons. Instead of wonder weapons being the main powerful guns, we started to have, I don't know what you'd quite call them, side weapons such as the 1-inch punch and the Hell's Retriever, other powerful weapons that you could obtain. In terms of graphics, there was a little bit of a difference between BO1 and BO2. One of my favourite things about this was new game modes being introduced into Zombies. Instead of the standard survival, we also had things like Grief and Turned. They were interesting and fun to say the least. But then we move on to BO3. By this time, Zombies was its own fully fledged game mode. This was 100% the biggest graphical difference we had seen so far, which you would also expect since this was the first Treyarch Zombies game switching from the last generation consoles to the current generation, the PS4 and the Xbox One. However, I would also say possibly this was the game where we saw the least evolution, but it's still my favourite. Out of any World at War, BO1, BO2, 3 and 4, it's strange that Black Ops 3 for me and most people was the best we had. Compared to the previous game, there wasn't really any side modes other than survival. There was Nightmares, although we're not going to talk about that one. But in terms of maps, we had Shadows of Evil, The Giant, which was a remake of Derice. Then there was Horizon Draka, Zetsubenoshima, Gorod Karovi and Revelations. Between these maps, feature-wise, there wasn't really any differences. In fact, it was even more, could you say, less than previous games. Usually between maps we would have at least new perks or wonder weapons, whereas on BO3, besides from the very first one, Shadows of Evil, every map after that, we no longer had new perks. I suppose the replacement for this was the Gobblegum system, but feature-wise, each map was pretty similar. They played pretty much the same as well. This game continued with the premise crew. However, in the first map on disc, Shadows of Evil, we were given a different set of characters. Black Ops 3 also introduced boss fights. Now at the end of every map, there was a boss we had to defeat. I think this is one of the best things that Zombies has introduced. Black Ops 3 was the first time we were introduced to a new species that weren't the undead, and these were the Apothecans and the Keepers. We would later go on to hear more about Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man. This was definitely where the story got the most complex. Before this it was pretty simple, but BO3 onwards, it is where the story got confusing. Another new thing that we saw added here into Zombies, which was taken from multiplayer, was the special weapons. This would later go on to be improved in BO4. But yeah, overall, Black Ops 3 didn't really evolve from the previous games. The gameplay felt better, but that was mainly down to the actual engine of the game, not Zombies itself. The maps were great. The Giant, Shadows of Evil, Horizon Draka is probably one of my favourite maps of all time. Zetsubenoshima at the time wasn't well received, but now it's not too bad. Gorod Karovi is a fan favourite, and Revelations, the ending, but not the ending to our Zombies storyline. But yeah, even though BO3 was considered the best, and I agree with that, if you think about it, it's also the one where least things were changed from other games. and maybe that's why it was so good. Because zombies had been built on previously and it had gotten to a good state, maybe there was no need to add new things. And is that where Black Ops 4 went wrong? Because for me, this was the game since Zombies began that had the most changes. First off, in a way, no matter what Treyarch did to this game, I think it was always doomed to fail. And I don't mean fail as in success, obviously it sold an awful lot, but in terms of player count and interest, it was noticeably lower than other games. In my opinion, and from what I've seen other people say, most of this was down to the game engine, so no matter what Treyarch did, no matter what they added, it was never going to feel as good as it could have. I think if they added Black Ops 3's maps or BO2 maps into this game, they still wouldn't have been praised. This was the first time in 10 years that Treyarch began a new zombie storyline. We are stuck with the same one all the way since 2008, and now all of a sudden in 2018 we were given a new story, which was Chaos. Black Ops 4 would give us both the Chaos and Ultima story at the same time. This was the most amount of zombies maps we had ever had on disc. There were 2 Chaos maps, Voyage of Despair and 9, and 1 Ether map, which was Blood of the Dead. However, there was a bonus one that you would purchase called Classified, of course a remake of 5. The other maps we were given was Dead of the Night for DLC 1, DLC 2 was Ancient Evil, that rounded off the Chaos storyline for a while, and then we continued with the Ether story for DLC 3 with Alpha Omega, and then ended the Ether story with Tag der Toten on DLC 4. Half of the maps in this game upon release were not given the praise we were used to seeing. Void of Despair, Blood of the Dead, Dead of the Night, even Alpha Omega and Tag der Toten, before their release were getting a lot of stick. This was mainly because all of the Ether maps in BO4 were remakes. Classified was 5, Blood of the Dead was Mob of the Dead, Alpha Omega was Nuketown, and Tag der Toten was Call of the Dead. But the maps weren't the only problem. People just didn't have an interest in the Chaos story, and since that was half of the game, a lot of fans just weren't interested at all. I mean, of course it's totally your opinion which maps you like and which maps you don't, but that wasn't it. Black Ops 4 revolutionised the perk system. This was something we had for 10 years in Zombies, ever since the second Zombies map Erupt. All the way back in World at War, we had been seeing the original perks such as Juggernaut, Quick Revive, Speed Cola, Double Tap, but all of a sudden, they were gone in this game, and we were given a whole new system. This wasn't received well. Also, the Gobblegum system, which a lot of people actually found a useful feature in BO3, was now changed to the Elixirs. These were nowhere nearly as appealing as the Gobblegums. They were more, for me at least, annoying being placed on your screen with that disgusting hood. We were also given a new game mode, which was Rush. This was the first time since BO4 we had seen other game modes. Personally, I don't think I've ever played it once, so I can't comment on it, although it wasn't too popular. It just wasn't something that appealed to me, unlike Turned or Grief. Those actually seemed like good concepts. Rush didn't. Another new thing that was added were the special weapons. For me, this was one of the good things that they did, whether it was the Ragnaroks, the sword, the Hammer of Valhalla. The special weapons for the Chaos and Ether story were a good implementation. This was an improvement from the special weapons in BO3. Another thing that evolved was the health system. Since there was no longer Juggernog, we were now normally able to withstand 4 hits instead of the usual 3, but also because there was no Juggernog, before this we could actually take 6 maximum, whereas now we could have 4, so depending on how good you were, because I don't think the maps were too difficult, this either meant it was harder for you or it was easier, but that was mainly down to gameplay. And then we also had custom mutations, where you could literally change everything to your playstyle, from the health, the speed of the zombies, the mystery box, the pack-a-punch. However, if you did this, you weren't able to do Easter eggs, so how popular this feature actually was, I'm not too sure. I used it an awful lot to get gameplay, it's useful, but I think if I wanted to actually just play the game for fun, maybe it's not something you'll use all too often. But it was a nice new addition, along with the fact that you could now play with bots. There was also plenty of Easter eggs. This game wrapped up the storyline for Ether, this is where it ended, and left us on a big cliffhanger for the Chaos story. But even with all of these changes, it was definitely the most different Zombies experience, I guess you could say. It was also at the same time the worst, and as I said earlier, for me this was mainly down to just the feel. The engine, along with removing the perks, the HUD and other things. They changed a lot, but did they change too much? And I think they did. But as you can see, the evolution of Zombies has definitely been up and down. We started off in World at War with absolutely nothing. We then got to Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 as it built up. In Black Ops 3, I think that's the game where we had the least changes. And then Black Ops 4 came around, where they changed so much that it was maybe too much. And it didn't exactly feel like the old zombies that we all fell in love with. And so, there we go. Where are we going next? Are we getting Black Ops 5 zombies? Will we get a reboot of the Ether storyline, or just a continuation of Chaos? A new story maybe? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you have, drop a like rating, make sure you are subscribed, and we'll see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.